Picture this. You're lying on a straw mattress in a drafty stone cottage in Yorkshire, England, in the winter of 1347 AD. The wind howls through gaps in the timber walls, and your breath forms small clouds in the frigid air beside you. Your husband's calloused hand finds yours beneath the rough wool blanket. But this moment of tenderness is interrupted by the wet cough of your mother-in-law, who sleeps barely 3 feet away on her own pallet. Beyond her, your two young children shift restlessly in their shared bed. And in the corner, the pregnant sow that will feed your family through spring grunts softly in her pen. This is intimacy in the medieval world. Stolen moments between the snores of relatives, whispered endearments masked by the crackling of dying embers, and the constant awareness that every gesture, every touch, every breath is witnessed by someone. Privacy, as we understand it today, simply did not exist. The very concept would have been as foreign to a 14th century peasant as flying to the moon. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world. Connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. Share your commitment with the phrase, "I practice inner strength," in the comments, and let's embark on this mysterious historical journey to reconnect with our own truth. Ready? Let's begin. The single-room dwelling where you lie was home to perhaps 8 or 10 people spanning 3 generations. Your husband's elderly father occupies the place of honor nearest the hearth, his arthritic joints requiring warmth. The unmarried brother sleeps on the floor beside the door, ready to defend the household. 2 servants, if you're fortunate enough to afford them, curl up in the barn with the animals when the weather permits. But during the harshest months, they too crowd into the space barely larger than a modern apartment bedroom. Yet, somehow within this maze of humanity, married couples found ways to express their love, to conceive children, and to maintain the bonds that held families together. The methods they developed were born of necessity, refined through generations, and passed down through whispered instructions from mother to daughter, father to son. The architecture of intimacy. The architecture of medieval homes reflected this reality, even among the wealthy. The Great Hall served as the communal living space where the entire household gathered. The lord and lady might retreat to a solar, a private chamber. But even these rooms often housed multiple family members. Archaeological evidence from 13th century manor houses in England reveals that most bedchambers contained multiple beds, sometimes separated by nothing more than hanging tapestries or wooden screens. In the peasant cottage, space was even more precious. The single room served as kitchen, workshop, dining hall, and bedroom. The hearth provided the only source of heat and light, making it the natural gathering place for all activities. Furniture was minimal, perhaps a table that could be disassembled when not in use, a few stools, and the precious beds that represented significant investments for most families. The bed itself was a marvel of medieval engineering, designed not for comfort, but for survival. The frame was built high off the ground to avoid drafts and rodents. The mattress, a generous term for what was often little more than a sack filled with straw, feathers, or rags, was covered with whatever fabric the family could afford. The wealthy might have linen sheets, while the poor made do with rough wool or hemp. Multiple families often owned a single set of bed linens, washed perhaps once a month if water was available. Social and moral constraints. But the physical constraints were only part of the challenge. Medieval society operated according to strict social hierarchies and codes of conduct that governed every aspect of daily life. The church taught that sexual desire was sinful, to be indulged only within marriage and only for the purpose of procreation. Public displays of affection were frowned upon, and marital relations were expected to be conducted with discretion and modesty. These moral constraints created a complex web of unspoken rules and subtle communications. A married couple might signal their intentions through seemingly innocent gestures of lingering touch when passing a cup of ale, a meaningful glance across the hearth, a whispered comment about checking the animals in the barn. These coded messages had to be interpreted correctly by the intended recipient while remaining invisible to the watchful eyes of parents, siblings, and servants. The rhythms of life. The timing of intimate moments required careful choreography. Most households followed a rhythm dictated by the seasons and the demands of agricultural life. During harvest time, when everyone worked from dawn to dusk, exhaustion often trumped desire. Winter brought its own challenges, the cold that made undressing dangerous, the early darkness that compressed all activities into a few precious hours around the fire, and the close quarters that made every sound audible to sleeping family members. Spring offered the best opportunities for privacy. As the weather warmed and the days lengthened, couples could escape to the fields under the pretense of checking crops or gathering herbs. The forest provided secluded spots for clandestine meetings, though these excursions carried risks: bandits, wild animals, and the ever-present threat of discovery by neighbors who might gossip or report suspicious behavior to local authorities. Summer brought its own rhythm of opportunity and constraint. The long days of agricultural work meant that couples might find themselves alone in the fields during the heat of midday when others sought shade. But the harvest season also brought additional laborers, hired hands, relatives from neighboring villages, and migrant workers who further crowded the already cramped living spaces. Religious and economic influences. The church calendar imposed additional restrictions on intimate relations. The medieval Catholic Church designated numerous feast days, fast days, and periods of penance during which marital relations were forbidden. Advent, Lent, and the weeks surrounding major religious holidays were times of mandatory abstinence. Even within marriage, couples were expected to refrain from sexual activity on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays, leaving only 4 days a week when intimacy was religiously sanctioned. Pregnancy brought its own set of challenges and opportunities. Church doctrine decreed that sexual relations should cease once a woman was visibly pregnant, and the period of purification after childbirth, typically 40 days, further restricted intimacy. Yet these same periods of enforced celibacy created anticipation and longing that intensified the eventual reunion. The midwife played a crucial role in managing these intimate aspects of married life. She was often the only person in the community with detailed knowledge of female anatomy and reproductive cycles. Her advice on timing, positioning, and contraception was sought secretly by women who dared not discuss such matters openly. The midwife's presence in the home during childbirth also provided one of the few opportunities for frank discussions about marital intimacy, conducted in whispered conversations, while the laboring woman's husband and male relatives waited anxiously outside. Children and privacy. Children presented perhaps the greatest challenge to marital privacy. In most medieval households, children slept in the same room as their parents well into adolescence. The concept of separate bedrooms for children was unknown except among the very wealthy. Young children were often oblivious to their parents' intimate moments. But older children posed a more delicate problem. The solution was a complex system of education and willful ignorance. Children learned to sleep deeply, to ignore certain sounds and movements, and to understand that some activities were strictly for adults. Parents developed techniques for minimal movement and maximum silence, conducting their intimate lives in a space smaller than a whisper. The church bed curtains served multiple purposes beyond warmth and privacy. These heavy fabrics, often the most expensive item in a peasant household, created a psychological barrier that allowed couples to imagine themselves alone, even when surrounded by family members. The curtains muffled sound and blocked sightlines, creating a cocoon of relative intimacy within the communal space. The physical realities. But even within this enclosed space, couples had to navigate the physical challenges of medieval life. Bodies that had been unwashed for weeks or months, clothing that served as both daywear and nightwear, and the constant presence of insects and vermin made physical intimacy a carefully orchestrated affair. The luxury of bathing was reserved for special occasions. occasions, perhaps once a month for the wealthy, far less frequently for the poor. The seasonal rhythms of medieval life created natural patterns of intimacy. Winter nights were long and cold, making the shared warmth of the marriage bed a practical necessity as much as an emotional desire. Spring brought the renewal of life and energy after the hardships of winter. Summer offered opportunities for outdoor privacy, while autumn's harvest celebrations provided rare moments of communal joy and relaxation. Economic pressures also influenced intimate relationships. In times of scarcity, the physical demands of survival could overwhelm emotional needs.
Conversely,
hunger, cold, and exhaustion were powerful dampeners of desire. Conversely, periods of relative prosperity, after a good harvest or successful trading venture, might bring renewed energy and optimism that translated into more affectionate relationships. Alcohol, travel, and marriage age. The role of alcohol in medieval intimacy cannot be overlooked. Beer and ale were safer to drink than water in many areas, making mild intoxication a common state. Wedding celebrations, harvest festivals, and religious holidays provided opportunities for couples to relax their usual restraints under the influence of alcohol. Though these same occasions often brought extended family and guests into the already crowded living spaces, the seasonal migration patterns of medieval life created additional opportunities for privacy. During summer months, many families would send their livestock to graze in distant pastures, requiring shepherds to sleep in the fields. Young men might spend weeks traveling to markets or fairs, temporarily reducing the household population. These absences created brief windows of relative solitude for married couples. The economic realities of medieval life meant that many couples delayed marriage until their 20s or 30s when they had accumulated sufficient resources to establish their own households. This delayed gratification created intense anticipation and desire that had to be carefully managed within the constraints of Christian morality and social expectations. Arranged marriages were the norm among all social classes, though the degree of family involvement varied. Even in arranged unions, couples were expected to develop affection and compatibility over time. The intimacy that developed in these relationships was often deeper and more enduring than the passionate romances celebrated in medieval literature, precisely because it was forged in the crucible of shared hardship and mutual dependence. Legal and theological perspectives. The legal framework of medieval marriage gave husbands significant but beneficent authority over their wives' bodies and behavior. Canon law required wives to submit to their husbands' sexual demands, while simultaneously restricting those demands to reasonable frequency and purpose. These contradictory expectations created tension and ambiguity that couples had to navigate privately. The medieval understanding of female sexuality was heavily influenced by classical medical texts and Christian theology. Women were believed to be naturally more lustful than men, requiring constant vigilance and control. Yet the same texts acknowledged that female pleasure was necessary for conception, creating a complex web of desire and guilt that permeated intimate relationships. The practice of bundling, where courting couples were allowed to sleep in the same bed while fully clothed and sometimes bound together, demonstrates the elaborate methods medieval society developed to manage sexual desire within moral constraints. This practice, common in Northern Europe, allowed young people to experience physical closeness while theoretically preserving their virginity. Contraception, though officially condemned by the Church, was practiced throughout medieval Europe. Women passed down knowledge of herbs and techniques that could prevent pregnancy or terminate early pregnancies. This underground network of feminine wisdom operated in whispered conversations between mothers and daughters, midwives, and patients, creating a parallel system of knowledge that challenged official religious doctrine, cultural narratives, and evolving homes. The medieval concept of courtly love, popularized in literature and song, created an idealized vision of romantic relationships that bore little resemblance to the reality of married life. These literary fantasies served as both inspiration and torment for couples trying to find romance within the constraints of their daily lives. The architectural evolution of medieval homes reflected changing attitudes toward privacy and intimacy. The gradual development of separate bedchambers, the addition of chimneys that allowed for heating of multiple rooms, and the increasing use of glass and windows all contributed to the possibility of more private, intimate lives. However, these improvements were limited to the wealthy and came slowly over several centuries. The Black Death and beyond. The Black Death of 1347 to 1351 AD fundamentally altered the dynamics of medieval households. The massive population loss meant that surviving families often had more space and resources than their predecessors. The psychological impact of widespread death also changed attitudes toward pleasure and intimacy, as people sought comfort and connection in the face of mortality. Religious reform movements throughout the medieval period created additional pressures on intimate relationships. The rise of mystical Christianity, with its emphasis on spiritual marriage and celibacy, created new models of relationship that challenged traditional notions of marital intimacy. Some couples attempted to live as spiritual siblings, renouncing physical relations while maintaining emotional bonds. The guild system that dominated medieval urban life created new patterns of household organization. Master craftsmen, their wives, journeymen, and apprentices often lived and worked in the same building, creating complex hierarchies of authority and intimacy. The master's wife might find herself responsible for managing the emotional and physical needs of young men far from their families, while maintaining appropriate boundaries and preserving her own marital relationship. Time, arts, and daily rituals. The medieval understanding of time differed significantly from our modern conception. Without clocks, daily rhythms were determined by the sun, the church bells, and the natural cycles of work and rest. This organic approach to time created opportunities for spontaneous intimacy, but also made it difficult to plan private moments in advance. The role of music and storytelling in medieval intimacy cannot be underestimated. In a world without written entertainment, couples often shared songs, poems, and stories as forms of emotional connection. The rich tradition of romantic ballads provided a vocabulary for expressing feelings that might otherwise have remained unspoken. The medieval kitchen, with its central hearth and communal cooking arrangements, was often the heart of household intimacy. Couples working together to prepare meals, sharing tastes of food, and managing the complex logistics of feeding a large household, developed a wordless communication and physical coordination that translated into their private moments. The ritual of going to bed in a medieval household was a complex choreography involving multiple family members. The order in which people retired, the arrangement of bedding, and the careful management of the dying fire all required coordination and understanding. Within this routine, couples had to find moments for private connection without disrupting the household's rhythm, hospitality, and community. The medieval concept of hospitality required families to welcome travelers and guests into their homes, often for extended periods. These visitors further compressed the already limited space and created additional challenges for maintaining marital privacy. The obligations of hospitality sometimes took precedence over the needs of the married couple, testing the strength of their relationship. The seasonal celebrations of medieval life, harvest festivals, religious holidays, and life cycle events provided rare opportunities for community-wide relaxation of normal social constraints. These celebrations often featured dancing, drinking, and ritualized courtship behaviors that allowed married couples to express their affection more openly than usual. The medieval understanding of marriage as a sacrament meant that intimate relationships were believed to have spiritual as well as physical dimensions. This theological framework provided couples with a language for discussing their relationship that transcended mere physical attraction, creating possibilities for deeper emotional connection. The practice of pilgrimages offered medieval couples unique opportunities for privacy and intimacy. The journey to holy sites often required weeks or months of travel, during which couples could experience a degree of freedom from family and community oversight that was impossible in their daily lives. The shared hardships and spiritual experiences of pilgrimage often strengthened marital bonds. Legalities, health, and family structures. The medieval legal system's treatment of domestic violence and marital rape reveals the complex power dynamics within intimate relationships. While wives were expected to submit to their husbands, there were recognized limits to acceptable behavior. The community's role in policing these boundaries created additional pressures on couples to maintain the appearance of harmonious relationships. The medieval understanding of mental illness and emotional disturbance had significant implications for intimate relationships. Conditions that we might recognize as depression, anxiety, or trauma were often attributed to spiritual causes or imbalances in bodily humors. Couples dealing with these challenges had to navigate them without modern therapeutic frameworks or pharmaceutical interventions. The role of extended family in medieval households created complex networks of alliance and obligation that influenced intimate relationships. A wife's relationship with her mother-in-law, a husband's responsibilities to his siblings, and the presence of unmarried relatives all shaped the dynamics of marital intimacy. The medieval practice of fosterage, sending children to be raised in other households, created additional complications for parental intimacy. Parents had to balance their emotional needs with the practical requirements of their children's education and advancement, often making painful decisions about separation and reunion. The economic importance of marriage in medieval society meant that intimate relationships were always embedded within broader networks of property, inheritance, and social obligation. Couples had to navigate their personal desires within the context of family expectations and community standards, bodily realities, and community oversight. The medieval understanding of the body and its functions influenced intimate relationships in ways that are difficult for modern people to comprehend. The lack of privacy for basic bodily functions, the communal nature of hygiene practices, and the different standards of modesty all shaped how couples experienced physical intimacy. The role of godparents in spiritual relationships in medieval society created additional layers of social obligation that influenced intimate relationships. These quasi-familial bonds extended the network of people who might have legitimate interests in a couple's private life. The medieval practice of rough music, community-organized public shaming of couples who violated social norms, created powerful incentives for maintaining the appearance of appropriate marital behavior. This community surveillance system meant that intimate relationships were never truly private, even within the confines of the home. The seasonal rhythms of medieval religious life created natural patterns of intimacy and abstinence that couples had to navigate. The Church's teaching that certain times were more appropriate for marital relations created a complex calendar of spiritual and physical obligations. The medieval understanding of conception and pregnancy influenced intimate relationships in ways that reflected both scientific ignorance and theological conviction. The belief that maternal thoughts and experiences could influence the unborn child created additional pressures on pregnant women and their husbands. The practice of wet nursing among the wealthy created unique challenges for marital intimacy. The decision to send an infant to a wet nurse was often motivated by the desire to resume marital relations more quickly, but it also created emotional complications and social obligations that affected the couple's private life, grief, servants, and remarriage. The medieval understanding of grief and mourning influenced intimate relationships in profound ways. The high rates of infant and child mortality meant that couples frequently had to navigate the emotional aftermath of loss while maintaining their physical and emotional connection to each other. The role of servants in medieval households created complex dynamics of authority and intimacy. The presence of domestic staff who might witness private moments, the need to maintain appropriate boundaries with young servants, and the practical challenges of managing household labor all influenced how couples experienced their private lives. The medieval practice of arranged remarriage after the death of a spouse created unique challenges for developing new intimate relationships. Widows and widowers had to navigate the emotional complexities of forming new bonds while honoring the memory of their deceased partners. The medieval understanding of sin and redemption influenced intimate relationships in ways that created both constraint and possibility. The belief that marital intimacy could be sanctified through proper intention and behavior provided couples with a theological framework for understanding their physical relationship. The role of confession in medieval spiritual life meant that intimate relationships were subject to clerical scrutiny and guidance. The requirement to confess sexual sins to a priest created additional pressures on couples to conform to religious expectations while maintaining their private bond. Friendships, honor, and warfare. The medieval practice of spiritual friendship, intense emotional bonds between individuals of the same sex, created complex dynamics within households that influenced marital relationships. These friendships provided emotional outlets that both complemented and sometimes competed with spousal bonds. The medieval understanding of honor and reputation influenced intimate relationships in ways that extended far beyond the private sphere. A couple's ability to maintain the appearance of proper marital behavior was essential to their social standing and economic opportunities. The seasonal patterns of medieval warfare created unique challenges for maintaining intimate relationships. The departure of men from military campaigns, the arrival of soldiers seeking shelter, and the constant threat of violence all influenced how couples experienced their private lives. The medieval practice of apprenticeship and service created complex household dynamics that influenced intimate relationships. The presence of young people from other families, the responsibilities of masters and mistresses for their charges, and the emotional complications of quasi-parental relationships all shaped the context of marital intimacy, age, magic, and dreams. The medieval understanding of old age and its effects on intimate relationships reflected both practical realities and cultural expectations. The belief that sexual desire naturally diminished with age provided couples with a framework for understanding changes in their physical relationship over time. The role of magic and folk beliefs in medieval culture influenced intimate relationships in ways that often conflicted with official religious teaching. The use of love potions, fertility charms, and protective amulets created alternative frameworks for understanding and managing marital intimacy. The medieval practice of pilgrimage created unique opportunities for spiritual and physical intimacy. The shared experience of religious devotion, the temporary freedom from social constraints, and the physical demands of travel all influenced how couples related to each other during these journeys. The medieval understanding of dreams and their significance influenced intimate relationships in ways that reflected both psychological insight and theological conviction. The belief that dreams could reveal divine will or demonic temptation created additional layers of meaning in couples' private experiences. The seasonal celebrations of medieval life provided rare opportunities for community-wide relaxation of normal social constraints. These festivals often featured ritualized courtship behaviors, dancing, and drinking that allowed married couples to express their affection more openly than usual. Economic bonds and midwives' wisdom. The medieval practice of dowry and bride price created economic frameworks for intimate relationships that influenced how couples understood their mutual obligations. The exchange of property and resources at marriage created practical bonds that complemented emotional connections. The role of midwives in medieval society extended far beyond childbirth to include guidance on intimate relationships. These women often served as confidential advisors to married couples, providing practical advice on contraception, sexual technique, and marital harmony. The medieval understanding of the relationship between physical and spiritual health influenced intimate relationships in complex ways. The belief that sexual behavior could affect both bodily health and spiritual well-being created additional considerations for couples navigating their private lives. The practice of communal sleeping arrangements in medieval households created unique challenges for maintaining marital intimacy. The need to share beds with children, relatives, and servants required couples to develop subtle communication systems and exceptional discretion. A medieval understanding of female sexuality reflected both medical ignorance and theological conviction. The belief that women were naturally more lustful than men created contradictory expectations that couples had to navigate in their private relationships. Public scrutiny and trial marriages. The role of gossip and community surveillance in medieval society meant that intimate relationships were always subject to public scrutiny. The need to maintain reputation and social standing created additional pressures on couples to conform to community expectations. The medieval practice of trial marriage, cohabitation before formal wedding ceremonies, created unique opportunities for couples to develop intimate relationships while maintaining some degree of social acceptability. These arrangements often lasted lasted for years before formal marriage vows were exchanged. The seasonal rhythms of medieval agricultural life created natural patterns of intimacy that reflected the cycles of work and rest. The intense labor of harvest time, the relative leisure of winter, and the renewal of spring all influenced how couples experienced their private relationships. The medieval understanding of conception and pregnancy influenced intimate relationships in ways that reflected both scientific ignorance and cultural expectation. The belief that conception required female pleasure created unique pressures and opportunities for couples navigating their physical relationship. Enduring bonds in a witnessed world. The role of extended family in medieval households created complex networks of obligation and affection that influenced intimate relationships. The presence of parents, siblings, and other relatives required couples to balance their private needs with family responsibilities. The medieval practice of fosterage and apprenticeship created unique challenges for maintaining family bonds and intimate relationships. The need to send children away for education and training often separated couples from their offspring for extended periods. The seasonal patterns of medieval religious observance created natural rhythms of intimacy and abstinence that couples had to navigate. The Church's designation of certain periods as inappropriate for marital relations required careful timing and self-control. The medieval understanding of the body and its functions influenced intimate relationships in ways that are difficult for modern people to comprehend. The lack of privacy for basic bodily functions and the communal nature of hygiene practices created unique challenges for maintaining romantic connection. The role of music and storytelling in medieval culture provided couples with languages for expressing affection that transcended the constraints of daily life. The rich tradition of romantic ballads and the practice of courtly love created idealized frameworks for understanding intimate relationships. The medieval practice of arranged marriage created unique challenges for developing intimate relationships within predetermined social frameworks. Couples had to navigate their personal desires within the context of family expectations and community standards. The seasonal celebrations of medieval life provided rare opportunities for community-wide relaxation of normal social constraints. These festivals often featured dancing, drinking, and ritualized courtship behaviors that allowed married couples to express their affection more openly. The medieval understanding of sin and redemption influenced intimate relationships in ways that created both constraint and possibility. The belief that marital intimacy could be sanctified through proper intention and behavior provided couples with theological frameworks for understanding their physical relationship. And so, as the fire dies down in that Yorkshire cottage in 1347 AD, and the wind continues to howl through the timber walls, you and your husband find ways to love each other that transcend the cramped quarters and watching eyes. Your intimacy is measured not in stolen hours of privacy, but in the gentle pressure of fingers intertwined beneath rough wool, in the shared breath that mingles in the cold air, in the unspoken understanding that this moment, however brief, however witnessed, belongs to you alone. The medieval world taught its inhabitants that love, like survival, required ingenuity, patience, and an acceptance of limits that would seem impossible to modern sensibilities. Yet, within those bounds, a profound and enduring connection flourished. Don't miss out on more fascinating insights into the past. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you're always in the loop with historical mysteries. You won't want to miss what we uncover next.